Now, Minden didn't just stay in New York. He also traveled extensively throughout Europe, and that's where he met another major player in the operation, Miroslaw Chojecki. Tell us about his contribution to the book club.
Yeah, so Chojecki was a Polish dissident. He was the son of a couple of Polish war heroes who'd been fighting the Nazis and were involved in the Warsaw Uprising. And so he had this kind of tradition in his family, if you like, of trying to fight the Polish oppressor. And at the end of the war, Poland had really just swapped one tyranny for another as the Red Army had marched in and taken charge of the country. And Chojecki was a kind of nuclear scientist by training, but he became radicalized really in the 1970s when he joined a dissident group that was trying to defend a group of striking workers from a crackdown by the security forces. And Chojecki would kind of represent them in court and try to get money for them and so on. And this led him into a very serious conflict with the Polish equivalent of the KGB, who were called the SB, and he would be beaten up regularly by regime thugs. He would be arrested, thrown in jail. The police were allowed to arrest you for 48 hours without charge, and they would do that and then release him, watch him walk across the street, and then arrest him again and put him back inside. So he was very much a victim of that kind of state oppression. But he also managed to, and this is his genius, I think, he was a sort of genius for conspiracy. He managed to launch an underground publishing house called NOWA with his friends and colleagues in the underground, which started printing uncensored books. They would start with those kind of reproduction mimeograph machines that we used to have at school, which produced kind of purple lesson notes for teachers. So they were very basic printing techniques to start with, but as time went on they got more and more sophisticated, and by the end they were using offset presses which were smuggled in from the West, which could print tens of thousands of copies of a publication. But in 1981 he was allowed out of the country and he came to the US to try and raise money for his print operations, and he was caught outside the country when the regime in Poland declared martial law, and they announced that they were going to round up everybody in the Solidarity trade union movement, which was the major opposition movement to the communists at that point, and realized that if he tried to go back he would be arrested and put in jail for probably for years. He didn't really know how long. So he decided that he would do his utmost in the West to help whoever was left in Poland in the opposition movement. And that's really when he started making contact with the CIA, just in the days after martial law was declared in December 1981.
So what was he doing in this book club?
Well, he was quickly given the job of being Solidarity's Minister for Smuggling, which was a role that essentially meant trying to support the few dissidents who were still at large within Poland after the crackdown. So he would have meetings with Minden, and they would agree what sort of books were going to be sent into Poland at that time. But he was also supporting the printers who were still at large in Poland. So very quickly after martial law, groups of Solidarity dissidents got together and realized that they needed to get their message out there. They needed to get the message out that Solidarity had not been crushed entirely. And Chojecki's job was to supply those with printing machines, with these kind of printing plates that you needed to work the presses, and with the presses themselves. But he also set up his own publishing group in Paris, which was where he ran his operations, which was called Contact. And Minden would purchase magazines and publications from Contact, and Contact produced all sorts of materials as time went by. He moved with the technology, if you like. So he went from books to video to audio cassettes to video cassettes, and then by the end of the 1980s he was actually running a satellite TV station that was beaming a kind of uncensored message into Poland from Paris.
So he was very busy, and even when he was doing this work in Paris, he was still operating at great risk with Soviet spies there. At one point, his apartment was even torched.
Yeah, he was a constant target of the Eastern security services. He would get threats all the time, which he'd had in Poland too, so he was kind of used to this treatment. At the very end of the Cold War, I think it was 1989, he was told that his apartment in Western Paris had been torched, and he went there. Luckily his family were away on holiday at the time, but he got there and found the whole place was kind of blackened and burnt out. And it was a couple of local lads who said in court they'd been approached by a mysterious figure who'd offered them money to torch the Chojecki's apartment. So he was entirely convinced that this was a communist attempt to get revenge on him.
It takes a certain type of person to do the kind of work that he did. And fast forward many years, and he received the highest civil award in Poland. And I know you know this, but I think others might not know that he just passed away this October.
Yeah, it's very sad. I interviewed him. I spent a lot of time with him in his later years. I know he was very aware of the book. I think his wife had read the book, who reads English. And I think he was very proud of being recognized at last, because, you know, he'd kept this secret for so many years, for decades. And I think people didn't really realize how significant his role had been in bringing a kind of peaceful conclusion to the Cold War in Poland.